This presentation is about women in politics and why we should vote for her. A brief roadmap of my presentation. First, we're going to start with the introduction, our problem, then move on to our question and our reasoning for our question, and then on to our resolution when we're excited. Our story starts with Boudica in 60 CE. She was one of the first women rulers on record after Christ was born. She was the ruler of the Iceni people, and when the Roman Empire went to attack northern England and take over most of the land in Europe, she brought up all of her civilians and they fought back and killed over 70,000 ancient Romans in battle. Now, they did unfortunately get defeated, but this is let alone proof that women can lead, and starting thousands of years ago. And she is one of the very few women that from then until today that have been rulers of massive, massive countries. Our problem here today is about the United States and how women in government have been marginalized and have been silenced their voices. Our problem we hear from Antonius of people now abandon what nature has put in their power in order to set their hopes and dreams in the report of others, meaning that because there's been kind of a mentality to not put women in charge in leadership positions, we think that because they have not led in the past that they are not supposed to be leading today. This is a stigma that is affecting the United States, and in the United States specifically. Now, I cannot say the same for other countries because Europe has had many prime ministers who are women. The country of New Zealand has had many women prime ministers, and even southern South American countries, including Argentina and Chile, have all had women presidents ruling their country. And so we at the United States is behind this. As we can see, only 30% of women in government are in local government positions. When you have women about 51% of the population and only 30% are being represented in your local governments, there is a problem and there's a silencing of voice. The next can be seen in the women, only 5% of women are even in the House of Representatives, and so women going to go represent on a national scale, there's only 28%, not even close to 50%. We move on to the US Senate, where you have two senators per state for 50 states, and only 25% of our 50 states have women in leadership positions in our government. Now, our question today is, why is it important to support and encourage additional women to have leading political roles? Well, it is important because without women in leadership positions, with women in leadership positions, women do have resilience in leadership. This is one of the main things that women have the upper hand on men when they're put into a leadership role. The second is, if without women in government positions, there's marginalization in the government. And third, with women in our government, there have been vast improvements as seen as around the world, and the little that they have done today with the positions they've been in. We wanted to see the resilience and leadership of women. We first look at the limitations with we look at Chamorro Premusic, who was at the Harvard Business Review, who said that resilience alone is not enough when in a leadership position in general. This comes from business to any role where you're leading over a team. Resilience alone is not something that you can help with. Now, he also says that leaders must have integrity and teams must be put first. And this is something, if you don't have those two other things, then resilience alone is not something that can be viable. Now, we move on to Cecily Richards, who is the past president of the United States Planned Parenthood Association, who said that women actually build a better life for others. Along with the resilience that they have, they look and they protect more than people than just themselves. This is because of this motherly idea and stigma that women have in leadership positions. They treat other people with mortality and respect. And because of this, they achieve resilience in the workplace, overall making a better, more workable environment. Next, we see the marginalization in our government. This is Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm was in the 1970s. She was the leading activist on Roe v. Wade, and so her job as an activist was to convince the all-male House and Senate to vote and to pass ideas that would hopefully put the country into a place to support Planned Parenthood. Now, she didn't look at this in the way that, this would give rights to women, or this would help women in an environment, and this would give them more chances and opportunities in a world. She looked at it more economically, and she presented this case to them, and therefore, at the end of the day, Roe v. Wade passed, and things were pretty good for a while. Today, recently, because of the marginalization in our government, we have lost this. We have lost this right and lost this power. This is one of the many rights that women have been lost today, and potentially is leading to a snowball effect of that more rights of women can be lost without women in leadership positions. When putting women in leading political positions, you can hopefully to have more equal rights and have more voices in the government, so we can prevent marginalization. Our final one today is our improvements in our government. Women do make improvements in our government. First, we look at Jacinda Ardern, who was the past Prime Minister of New Zealand. She decreased child poverty by 41% in her years as president, which the child poverty and homelessness in New Zealand were extremely high. People living on the streets, very unsanitary, and probably some of the worst statistics in more developed countries. Jacinda Ardern stepped in and said, look, we're not going to be doing this, and she decreased child poverty and poverty in general by 41%. She also is produced one of the leading countries of the world's best COVID-19 relief plans. She had, instead of going out and saying, being these pressing, like the United States, for example, we had these very harsh ways of, putting people into their houses and going alone, and we very much of an isolationist tactic in the United States, where Jacinda Ardern here said, focus more on the morality and more on to the mental states of her citizens, and focus more on that outreach with COVID-19. And therefore, because she had the stigma that they were all in this together, there was a lot better produced from the thing. Now, we also look something that's happening on the national scale. This is WeDo, which is an environmental development, the Women's Environmental Development Organization that was recently started in the 90s based on women helping make a difference in the environment and in women's rights. This was started by a group of activists and senators in 1991, and it protects the rights and gender equality and the integrity of the environment. It was started here in the United States to help make more advances in the EPA and different environmental laws, but then it spread to the United Nations, and it's one of the leading organizations associated with the United Nations to combat climate. So a great success that women just right here in the United States have done with the limitations that they've had, and it's a great reason why that women should be voted on and making more of an equal representation in our government. Now, looking at all of our reasons with the resilience of women in our government, the marginalization of women, and the improvements women have made in our government, we see that yes, we do need more women in our government because they do make great changes. Now, there's a couple things that we do need to be looking at, especially of course, because women have, when we look into our government today, women are already in our government. I mean, our Vice President, Kamala Harris, is one of the women who was one of the top ranking females in the United States, along with Hillary Clinton in 2016, who won the popular vote of the election. But this alone is not enough. We need to spread awareness and make more of a known-nality to make women more prevalent in our government so we can have a better, more prosperous future. Thank you.
Okay, over here. Okay, Olivia, my first question for you is, how did you approach and synthesize the differing perspectives in order to reach a conclusion?
So how I approached and synthesized my different points of view was actually very difficult at first, because when you look at the synthesis arguments that we're giving on resilience, none of it has anything to do with women in leadership, but it does have something to do with leadership. When you look at when you try to inflate that over, there was a few pulls and jumps you had to make, but overall, once I had an idea of, yes, women do fit into this category, and they do have, like, for example, when I used the Cecily Richards part to try and represent from the Harvard Business Review of the dark side of resilience, having her point of view and seeing that not only are we resilient, but we do a lot more, helped honestly bounce off of what the Dark Side of Resilience had to say.
Okay. And then, what are the implications of your findings to your community?
This is actually very interesting. I live in the city of Lubbock, which is more on the more conservative side part of Texas, but actually women serve 50% in our city council. This is something that might actually boost our statistics and have something to say about, you know, what we are as a community. That, you know, we don't go around and raising awareness about how women should be in our government. The women are just naturally in our government. And I think this shows that in the future, I think as more people are more open to women leading, there will be naturally more women, as in my city where there's 50% women in our city council.